our newsletter this month happened to fall on a Thursday.
Hey, that gave us a cool opportunity.
Right. So in Throwback Thursday style, we included a link to a 1977 brochure for Cumberland Island.
Which was
is
even
very
before
cool.
I was born.
Yeah.
Let me say for the record. But the language they used and seeing that the cost of the ferry was $2 round trip.
Yeah.
$1 if you were a senior.
Right.
Right. Very beginning of that brochure talks about its congressional intent. Right. So I encourage everybody to check that out. It's important for us to remember and reflect on history and see how things have changed. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Jessica, Executive Director of Wild Cumberland.
And I'm Devin, a Wild Cumberland volunteer.
Thanks for being here.
We start every podcast episode with the same reminder. Our monthly newsletter is the very best way to stay up to date on issues affecting Cumberland Island and its wilderness. So if you haven't already, go to wildcumberland.org and get yourself signed up. In today's episode, we're covering our August email newsletter content. We'll talk about what is or isn't going on at the Seashore. We'll announce a couple of virtual opportunities for you to learn more about the Blake Plateau and Cumberland Island. And as always, we'll highlight some top local and national news related to the island and wilderness in general.
Yeah, we've received a lot of questions recently about what is, as you mentioned, and is not going on. I think some of that has to do, of course, with some of the transition we've been experiencing. It's been almost 2 years since the Seashore put forward this plan that was called VUMP, the Visitor Use Management Plan, and its environmental assessment. It had a lot of sweeping changes proposed, I guess you would say, for the Seashore, but we have not had any updates since that time.
For those of you who may be unfamiliar, this plan proposed to more than double the island's daily visitors at a retail store, boat rentals, boat tours, and a whole lot more. So we strongly encourage those who are unfamiliar with what this plan proposed to read it for themselves, and you can find that on the NPS website.
Yeah, the proposed plan and its environmental assessment generated well over 2,000 public comments. It required an extension of the public comment period and brought some pretty serious concerns from other conservation and environmental groups besides ourselves. Of course, some of those comments and ours are on the website, and we encourage people, if they're not familiar with the plan, as you said, to read it for themselves, but they can also find those comments. So,
yeah, this was a hot topic for sure. Does the agency have any obligation to respond to the public comments?
Well, there's no requirement for them to respond about an EA, so an environmental assessment, as opposed to an environmental impact statement, which is a more comprehensive environmental analysis.
Okay.
But the NPS's own NEPA handbook does sort of outline a standard practice for responding to what they consider substantive comments in regard to their projects. So the substantive comments are defined as things that question the accuracy of the information they give. They question maybe the environmental analysis itself, and they often present reasonable alternatives, maybe things the agency hadn't considered in its scoping.
Sure.
But comments that just sort of say they support or oppose a proposal or plan are not necessarily considered substantive. So
it's like they have to give feedback almost.
So it's not like they just write you a letter back.
Yeah.
To your substantive comments. They can do a couple things. So they can make a correction to the EA or the EIS, what they deem a correction to be. They can change it and modify the plan. They can, in fact, employ new alternatives that the public hasn't even sort of considered yet. And they can also just cite sources that validate their position and sort of move forward. So
they can kind of do whatever they want. For lack of better terms.
I guess that's kind of a way to say it. I mean, they can issue a revised plan and go through a public comment period again, but they do not have to do that. So I think the final EA, whenever that is issued, is supposed to include an appendix that sort of summarizes or contains most of the responses that the agency made to the public. So
So nothing official
Right.
on VUMP.
That's the short way of saying it. Yes. And everybody wants to know. I mean, it really is probably the most common question I've been getting for the last 3 to 6 months is what's going on with VUMP. Are they really going to make these sweeping changes? But yeah, so they could either choose to ignore or address the public comments they received in sort of any of those ways. And we're just waiting.
Yeah, and we have a new manager.
That's maybe part of the reason we're just waiting,
Sure.
To be fair. But I think, it has been a while. And I think given the level of involvement and engagement that the public had to do in a very short period of time, like sort of by surprise, that I think that it would be a responsible thing to do to communicate back out to the public and let us know where that is.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think everyone is eager for the new superintendent, Melissa Trenchick, to share her own management priorities for that and provide updates on the projects that were initiated prior to her tenure. After all, there are other projects that weren't included in the visitor use management plan at all.
That's right. The Grange renovation, the Sea Camp Ranger Station renovation, all of these things were sort of separate from and not included in the visitor use management plan and are also outstanding. So, but of course, our organization will continue to say that, we're 42 years overdue on a wilderness management plan. That was a large part of our newsletter content this month.
Yes.
We've actually added some new website content. I don't even know if you've seen it yet, about the wilderness management plan and why it's required, and why it's important. So we hope folks will go check that out. There are some ways to help get people more involved in the work we're doing to help make sure that happens.
Yeah, and we also think it's really important that you, as viewers and listeners, let the agency and your elected officials know how much you value wilderness and that you support the prioritization of a wilderness management plan for Cumberland Island.
Yeah, I think that's the simplest step anybody can take is sending their congressional or elected officials a note, the park management a note, and let them know that that is something they really value about this particular park unit. I think that's always a good idea.
And now it's time to hear questions for the host.
So recently I went on an airboat tour in Apalachicola, and they had wild boars, and the tour guide himself had been gored in the leg by a wild boar. Now, you folks mentioned there are wild hogs. Is that the same thing, boar and a hog? Are these dangerous hogs on Cumberland Island? Is it safe? Is a wild hog and a boar the same thing?
All right.
Thanks for sending us your question. That was really good.
Absolutely. We love hearing from everyone. There's a few questions to kind of break down in there, right?
Okay, let's start with whether feral hogs are the same thing as boars.
Right.
So feral hogs, which are not native to the United States and are sort of descendants of, again, free-ranging livestock way, way back, I think are the same. I mean, boars are the same thing. Boars are just the male, specifically the male of a wild hog.
Right. From how I understand it, boars, hogs, pigs, I mean, they're basically
swine.
Right. They're all the same, right? Except boars are specifically referring to usually the unaltered male.
Right.
The wild
They can
version
have the
of that.
tusks.
Right.
So they can be potentially like all wildlife.
Right. There's always a danger.
But
correct.
Yes, I think if you're on Cumberland Island, the likelihood of being injured by feral swine is very low. I don't typically find the hogs to be that aggressive. They have sometimes been in a large enough concentration, or perhaps during like a mating season, where I didn't feel comfortable going too close.
Sure.
But I'd be curious if there have been any injuries reported on the seashore from the feral hogs. That's a good question I don't know the answer to.
Yeah, and just from doing kind of a quick Google search about hog injuries on Cumberland, nothing, pops up at the top. So
well, you wouldn't see that.
Right, exactly. So. But, usually with, usually you can find something. But
I mean, I've been there camping when you can hear them audibly near your campsite, some, serious behavior.
Sure. So to answer this person's question, I have never had a bad experience with a hog, a boar, or anything on the island. Have you? You've been going a lot longer than I have.
No, I have not.
Okay. So that sort of answers your question. Yeah. We think for the most part you're safe. Obviously, you want to treat wildlife like all other wildlife.
And I
kind
feel like
of,
we should disclaim this. We are not National Park Service rangers. We are not
Right.
scientists.
We're just two people who visit
Please
the island.
consult recreation.gov and nps.gov for all specific questions. But that's a good one and an important one, and one that I can see might be a little intimidating to somebody who's not familiar with sharing wild spaces with that particular animal. So I am eager to hear what their experience is like. Maybe they'll report back when they pay their visit and let us know if they have any hog encounters and if they felt safe.
Yeah, I hope so. But thanks for sending that in. We appreciate your questions, and hopefully, you appreciate our answers.
So remember, go to the website. You can use that speak pipe function. You can do it anonymously. You can ask us anything you like about Cumberland Island and our podcast and our work, and we are happy to answer.
Absolutely. Thanks for sending that in. We've also received several inquiries related to the status of e-bike policies on public lands managed by the NPS, and more specifically, of course, on Cumberland Island.
Yeah, and I wish I could offer a little more there. Maybe the new superintendent will be able to shed some light on that for us specific to the site when we talk. But it was a year ago, there was a public comment opportunity by the Park Service at a national level for people to comment on their e-bike policies. And that happened. We commented. You can find a copy of our comments on our website, but nothing's been done. Like the agency hasn't issued a NEPA process or any sort of way for parks to evaluate impacts from e-bikes at specific units. So we're just all waiting.
That's been over a year ago.
Again, still waiting.
The waiting game continues, right?
But that's really important. I think specifically at Cumberland Island for obvious reasons, right? Not many park units have a wilderness that is bisected by a road that is subject to that type of vehicular traffic. So it is particularly impactful and meaningful at small sites like ours, and where there are those sorts of exceptions to the rule.
Sure.
And I think that it bears maybe more urgency or scrutiny for us to consider what happens with e-bikes on Cumberland. So.
Wild Cumberland is staffed entirely by volunteers. We say that a lot, often in passing, but we want to make sure our listeners understand what that really means. Our team members donate their time, effort, and talents to help ensure that Cumberland Island and its wilderness remain protected. Every volunteer can find a place with us. We invite you to sign up to staff Wild Cumberland events, contribute to the organization's social media, assist in grant writing, and much more. Join us at wildcumberland.org and help make a difference for the next generation.
Oh, and speaking of September is National Wilderness Month.
Yes.
Do you know what that means?
We are marking the occasion by hosting our second annual Wild Cumberland Trivia Night series every Wednesday in September from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yep. It's just $10 a week donation or more. You can do more than $10.
Right.
We wouldn't be mad, but just $10 to play every week. And you can win we have something like over $500 in prizes.
Oh yeah, you can expect gift cards from various retailers, merchandise from Wild Cumberland and other local partners, and an island walking tour for 2, and much more. We're always adding to it to try to give people more incentive to play and donate. So,
I think it's important for people to remember you don't have to be like a Cumberland Island history buff to play or win.
There is all sorts of questions, mostly nature related. Obviously there are Cumberland Island questions, but we
and
go
wilderness
over
and leave no trace and even some pop
national
culture.
park, pop culture, pretty much anything. So
and
everyone
photo
has
ID,
a chance
like you
to
can
win.
like true false. I mean, we've really made this
yeah.
as accessible to everybody as we can because it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, last year we laughed a lot. We all learned something new, I think. And you don't have to be an expert on Cumberland Island.
So share with your friends.
Yes.
Maybe you could get a little team going and like some friendly competition.
You're listening to this year's hosts too. So it's Jess and I,
Getting a
just like
preview.
last year, getting a little preview, right? So if you like the podcast, you like hearing our voice, and you like trivia, join with us.
It'll be fun.
We also ask our supporters to guess which of the items in our 2024 Commitment to Cumberland mystery box was that they were found on Cumberland Island. And this kind of blew me away, right?
It was a really long list of items to try and
was.
choose which ones were found on Cumberland Island. Now, you mentioned the last episode, I think, that you had a guess or you thought you knew, which
that
were
was
you wrong?
I was definitely wrong. Right.
What did you think it was?
Oh, I threw an off the wall guess. It was something that I clearly didn't think that was going to wash up ashore, but the two items that did wash ashore, I mean, that blew my mind, right? So there was a hand decorated oyster shell.
Yep.
That washed ashore, and a collapsible dog bowl. I never would have thought that would have washed ashore.
It's amazing
right?
what you find on the beach.
It is.
Take a long walk.
It was still intact enough to like
wash it up, and it was perfectly
there
fine.
we go. Reuse it, right?
Hope Danny's enjoying that.
Yeah, I hope she is too. So in local and Cumberland Island news,
there was a lot of this.
There was a lot. Travel and Leisure readers, the website Travel and Leisure.
It's a publication, I believe, not just a website, just
also,
to defend the print readers in the group.
They recently named Cumberland Island as one of the 15 best islands in the continental U.S., which is both unsurprising and well-deserved, right?
Completely unsurprising. I'm just, the more people know about it, the quicker it changes. So.
Oh, yeah. Plaintiffs in the Spaceport Camden legal challenge, specifically this included Little Cumberland Island Homes Association, the Coretta Foundation, 100 Miles, and National Parks Conservation Association. They have been able to arrange what is called a stay in the litigation. The case is stayed pending any further actions that could result in a third party actually using the license to operate a spaceport. Jess, can you tell us what exactly that means?
I mean, I think most simply it means that like a new user or buyer would have to initiate a whole new environmental impact statement if for their proposed use, if they decided to use that site and that permit. But the lawsuit could also be revived to revoke it. So it's very good.
Okay, so for simplicity, it is
good.
Progress.
It is very good.
Okay, that's great to hear.
Yeah. Also, we pointed out, this was kind of cool, the Park Service identified some sites that are participating in something called STAMP, another acronym to add to our website.
Right.
Okay, STAMP. I've got to go update some things. This is called Shipwreck Tagging Archaeological Management Program. And so apparently climate change has escalated the need for us to identify shipwrecks off the coast. And so they're tagging and putting all these resources behind tagging shipwrecks. And apparently there's one on Cumberland Island or near Cumberland Island that's been tagged. I don't know where it is. Do you know where it is?
No, I don't. That
Does
was
anybody know
going
where
to
it
be
is?
my question to you, right?
Does the park know where it is? I'd love to know. I'm kind of curious. So we'll have to see if we find out any more about that. But I thought that was cool and worth mentioning because we saw Cumberland in that list of participants.
Always great to see Cumberland on news, I guess. When you're reading articles and Cumberland's on there, you just kind of get a little excited. FYI for everyone visiting over the next few months, the park announced that the Ice House Museum, which is near the island's Dungeness dock, has closed for exhibit renovations that are supposed to be complete in October. So thankfully, restrooms and the cooling room are not impacted by this closure.
Which is good because I'm sure it's pretty hot.
Oh, yeah, for sure. In larger NPS news, the NPS asked a federal judge to dismiss a lawsuit challenging its cashless policy. This is something we have not stopped talking about, and Jess will forever die on this hill.
I really will. It's outrageous. The fact that the Park Service is attempting to dismiss this lawsuit like others, it's just ridiculous.
Right.
I just have no more to say about it than that.
We refuse to accept our own
This is ridiculous.
currency.
And I mean, there's still an idea, and we linked to it in our newsletter, a recent editorial or perspective that no one should really have to pay for access to public lands to begin with.
That's a concept, right?
So lots of varying degrees of thought on that. But yes, I was very disappointed to see that the federal government was just trying to get out of their responsibility there.
Yep. Then we featured some interesting news articles that may not have been about Cumberland Island specifically, but are perhaps contextually important, especially if you've been listening to the podcast over the last couple months. Padre Island National Seashore in Texas is proposing to remove its invasive hogs. And at Channel Islands National Park in California, right off the coast of Santa Barbara, an endangered species of fox was able to recover after 5,000 feral hogs were eliminated. And that's apparently the fastest a mammal has ever delisted from the Endangered Species Act
Good
protections.
news for that fox.
Absolutely. And kind of relevant to our recent podcast conversation with Dr. Chris Mowry from the Atlanta Coyote Project, at Isle Royale National Park in Michigan, wolves were able to obtain food and garbage, leading to some changes in their food storage guidelines.
Sound familiar?
Yeah, sounds pretty close to home there, right?
Also want to call attention to two podcasts for our podcast listeners done by the National Parks Traveler recently. One was investigatingrecreation.gov. We've talked a lot about that system and its issues and that so many things. So that was a really great interview. And then another one on coastal climate change impacts. All of those are relevant to, I think, the work that we're doing. And
as always, they are linked in the newsletter, so check those out. If you're a subscriber, you know that our volunteers also included lots of links to articles that you will find relevant and interesting.
These are really good.
Yeah, there were a lot in this one.
You got to go back and do some reading, is what you're telling me.
Sure. Those included horseshoe crabs that have been hiding out in the marsh and actually like reproducing in the marsh.
Yeah, because for a long time, scientists thought that they were only laying their eggs on the beach.
Right.
But that's not true.
Not the case anymore. A new project aims to direct financial support for tribes with historical associations to specific public land units.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. Actually, all national parks, of course, sit on native lands.
Right.
But this initiative allows people to donate on a project website, and the funds are then distributed to participating tribes that are attached to those park units.
Very cool. Yeah. So I'm glad that this new project is bringing that to light.
Interesting to see those initiatives happening in other parts of the country.
Absolutely. Researchers have recorded the first ever images and data of a shark actually being struck by a boat. And this came hours after tagging an endangered species of that shark off the coast of Ireland in April.
This was really sad.
Yeah.
But I think an important read for everybody. This is a hazard for all of our marine life, right? Increasingly so, including the North Atlantic right whale, including manatees, sea turtles. But I think what was so startling was that this is the first time they've ever captured the actual point of impact from a ship strike.
Right after they tagged it, right?
A marine mammal. And so seeing that impact and seeing the damage and how it affected the shark's behavior and its feeding habits were really significant. So hopefully we can use that opportunity to help people understand why slowing their ship speeds and thinking about that a little differently is important.
And everywhere, right? Not just off the coast of Cumberland with the right whales or anything, just everywhere. Sure. Mass stranding involving 146 dolphins at Cape Cod. It was declared the largest in U.S. history.
Yeah, it's not an uncommon sight for these strandings to happen, but this is the largest one I think that they have on record, recent record. And I think the good news, though, is like 70% of the dolphins made it, thanks to the team that worked to rescue all of those animals.
That's good. Thank you to that team. Also going down the same path of climate change and just, things that are going on around the world. Record heat risk bleaching 73% of the world's coral reefs. So beginning in February of 2023, this is the fourth global mass bleaching event and the second in 10 years and the most widespread on record.
And maybe give some context to the importance of our discussion about the Blake Plateau.
Yes, that could relate to that for sure.
And then did you see air pollution is making it hard for insects to find the plants they need to pollinate?
Naturally, right?
Right.
Yeah. Research suggests that pollution can disrupt insect attraction to plants. So it's not only affecting us, it's affecting everything, right?
And then the funniest one, though, did you read the last?
Go ahead.
Well, it's not, I don't know if it's funny.
It's ironic.
So the Park Service in a certain park, it's in the Sequoia National Park. There's a place called Mineral King. I've never been there. I hear it's fantastic. But
maybe one day.
Apparently from spring to midsummer, marmots are invading visitor vehicles. So the Park Service actually wants people to drive their car onto a tarp
and wrap
their car to keep the animals out. It's just,
Wrap your car in a
there are
tarp.
pictures of this online. Have you seen it?
No,
You've got
I
to go
haven't
look.
seen
There's a
pictures.
whole lot of resources devoted to this. But apparently, once they get in there, they chew like squirrels or other varmints here in Atlanta.
Trust me.
They chew the wiring and the plastic and hoses and even consume the antifreeze. So they have people driving on a tarp and covering their car in a tarp.
Maybe I should wrap my house in tarp from all the
Would that
squirrels
work
getting
here
in the
in
attic and everything, right? Like they can't chew through the tarp.
I have so many questions.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we'll keep everyone updated on that.
But that was interesting. I thought that our team came up with some really interesting observations.
There was
Park Service news.
A lot of local and national news kind of related to Cumberland Island, and just like we mentioned earlier, contextualized over the past few months that people should be paying attention to. That's why we included it in the newsletter, right? Wild Cumberland was proud to join other organizations in an organizational letter to the Biden administration that was led by Sustainable Ocean Alliance in opposition to deep sea mining. We also joined more than 50 groups in a letter requesting protection for the Blake Plateau.
That thing ballooned really quickly.
Yeah, it did.
And I'm really excited. We're actually going to host a virtual education opportunity for folks. So if you didn't see this in the newsletter, make sure you go back, check it out. You can find a link to the Facebook event. You can register for the Zoom. I even made a special link just so it's easy for people to remember. It's bit.ly/Blake Plateau.
Very easy to get to.
I was so proud of my technological proficiency there. But we're going to have a special guest.
Yes.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the Blake Plateau. And so, because we get questions, what is it? Why is it important? How close is it to Cumberland Island? What does it mean? And we're going to try to answer some of those.
All viable questions too. And when is this?
Oh, thank you. It's August 21st. It's a Wednesday night. We're going to do it at 7:00. So hopefully it doesn't compete with everybody's busy schedules at back to school time. We will try to record it and make it available for people who can't attend, but make sure you register in order to get the recording and make sure that you're in there.
Sure.
Bring your dinner.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
7:00. Some people are still eating their dinner. Like, you don't have to turn your video on, but join us because, do you know who our guest is?
Who's our guest, Jess?
Beth Rems. I hope I said that right. I'm sorry, Beth. From GIPL, which is the short for Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. She's going to do a special presentation.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear more from her about the Blake Plateau and just honestly learn in general what it is and how it affects Cumberland Island. Because I think that's
very
huge.
close by.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as we've mentioned in a few other episodes, I mean,
we're all
we've
connected,
talked a lot.
right?
We
The
are all
integrity of the
connected.
wilderness depends on the integrity of that marine ecosystem.
Right. So we don't do this often, but our newsletter this month happened to fall on a Thursday.
Hey, that
So
gave
that
us
was-
a cool opportunity.
Right. So in Throwback Thursday style, we included a link to a 1977 brochure for Cumberland Island.
Which was
is
even
very
before I
cool.
was born.
Yeah.
Like, let me say for the record. But the language they used and like seeing that the cost of the ferry was $2 round
Yeah.
trip,
Yeah.
$1 if you were a senior.
Right.
Right.
I wish that was still the case.
I mean, there was some really interesting stuff there. I think it's important for us to reflect back on history and
Yeah.
see how things have changed.
I'd also like to point out that they have a little blurb in there, like a little section where they mention one word that can be used to describe Cumberland Island. Can you guess what that was?
There were a lot of really good words in there.
They used tranquility.
Oh, you like that
which
one?
I thought was pretty ironic considering what was proposed in the bump. You know?
Threatening to disrupt all
Right.
of that. Well, it does talk about the very beginning of that brochure talks about its congressional intent,
Yep.
right? Was
Yep.
so I encourage everybody to check that out. It's important for us to remember and reflect where we began this journey, right? For the Seashore.
So we know how valuable your time is. So we appreciate you choosing to spend some of it with us.
Stay wild.
The Wild Cumberland Podcast is produced by Vertical River, and this episode was edited by Greg Cuson.
Wild Cumberland is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and all donations are tax deductible. Learn more and take action at wildcumberland.org.